Hi, Jennifer. We're grateful to have you here and so thankful that you are willing to share your story and have it be part of such an impactful campaign, one that we know is making people not feel so alone. Um, I'll start with like letting you introduce yourself a little. You can just tell me like whatever you think that you want people to know about you, and then we'll kind of get into your story.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here. Not excited about the circumstances, but glad that I can just share my story and hopefully help somebody out. But yes, my name is Jennifer, and I guess just a little bit background with where I'm at right now. I have a 3-year-old son. Um, I just graduated from the University of Utah in International Affairs, so super excited about that. And um, I'm just excited to I feel like I've been doing a lot of healing with everything that's happened in the past, and I'm really excited to just kind of move forward and live my life now and just hopefully offer hope to other women that they can do the same.
Yes. Well, very happy to have you, and I'm excited to hear more about your story. I'll just start with kind of asking you like a basic question. How did your relationship begin?
Yeah, so I used to be a member of the LDS Church, and so I served a mission in Spain. So for those of you who don't know, it's 18 months for women, 2 years for men. And so I was 19, 20, 21 when I went to Spain. And while I was over there, I became friends with another missionary who was also serving there, but he was actually from Spain. Anyway, we became really good friends. And didn't talk again for 6 years after I came home. He stayed in Spain. I came back to Utah, and I just saw him on Facebook one day and saw that he was in Utah, and so I reached out and we connected. Um, we just connected and went out, and it went really fast after that. Um, so I would say at the beginning of the relationship, there was a lot of things that I hadn't healed yet, and in my head, I was 26, and just a lot of the women in my family had married really young, and just feeling like, okay, I need just put this pressure on myself of I need to get married. I really need to fulfill my duty to get married and have kids, and my time's running out. And so that was kind of on the back of my mind. I'd also just gotten out of a relationship that I'd been in off and on for 10 years and just felt like I hadn't been chosen. And so when this person came along that acted like, oh, I really love you, I want to be with you, and just like saying everything I wanted to hear, I immediately was like, okay, I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna trust this person, and I've waited so long for this, and now it's finally here. And so in the beginning, I would say it was just very fast. Lots of things I wanted to hear, and just myself not being in a super stable place as well.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like there was like some vulnerability there. And, that's like one of the things that I think is a common thread in a lot of these relationships is that one person is in like a vulnerable place and then it makes this relationship, the abusive relationship kind of have the thread work to take off almost. Um, I'm curious, like, were there signs in the beginning? Was there anything that felt off to you?
Yes, I feel like in the beginning I was trying to be really vigilant. I do think I had a tainted perception because I was still thinking of the man that he was during the mission, and that was the only side I saw of him. So it was just like this tainted perspective of I just thought that's who he was that one side. But when I look back, I really just um I think of little things that maybe I pushed to the side that were maybe bigger things. Um, when something were to go wrong or I didn't agree with something, it seemed like there was just excuses instead of accountability. Um, but in my head, it was, oh, like I'm being triggered from maybe my last relationship, so I need to take accountability for being triggered instead of, no, it's okay that I'm triggered and I'm allowed to bring up how I feel and he can validate how I feel, but like he never would validate how I was feeling. Um, Another big thing for me, kind of, it was early on. I mean, we didn't date that long. We started seeing each other at the beginning of February and we were engaged by the end of March. So really fast. But probably a few weeks in, I had told him, hey, I'm going to attend this class. It's really important to me. So I would really like your support with that. And he wanted to hang out with me that night. And I said, no, I made a commitment to this class. I'm going to do it. It's really important to me. And he said, and I said, you can come with me if you want, because anyone was allowed to come. And so he's like, yeah, I will. But he just didn't like that I didn't put him above the class. And so during the class, he was acting just like pretty grumpy throughout the whole thing. And he eventually just got up and left. And he started texting me. He was like out in the foyer and I was in the class and he just started texting me and like wouldn't let me be present in the class. And he was like, you should come out and talk to me. And in my head, I was like, no, like this was my priority. I wanted to attend this class. And then the other side of me was like, well, I should be more caring in a relationship. I don't want to repeat the same patterns that I had in my past relationship of just not being caring enough or whatever. And so it was just like two different things on my shoulder. And eventually I went out there to make sure he was okay. And he was like, I'm leaving, and just was angry, and I didn't understand why, and he wasn't communicating, and just he just left. And I remember like looking back at the class and then like looking at the door and looking back at the class and looking at the door. And in my head, I was like, do I choose myself and what I said I was gonna do, or am I a good partner and I go make sure he's okay? And I just remember pushing that door open and just, I don't know, that was like the beginning of the end for me. It was like I didn't choose myself, and from like there forward, it was just seemed like all downhill from there.
Yeah. I mean, it sounds like he made you feel like choosing yourself was a selfish move, when in reality, it was like, that's not the case. And, in relationships, you have to still continue to prioritize yourself, or else you're going to lose yourself in that relationship, which sounds like that's what you're describing may have taken place afterward. Can you tell me a little bit more about like what things were like for you as things continued to get worse and go downhill, as you had said?
Yes, like I said, we had a really quick time frame for dating. And so I think during that time frame, like I said, it was just the little things. It wasn't anything where I should be like, oh, this is a not a safe person. Um, and so by the time we got engaged, there really still wasn't anything that I was too worried about. Um, and then after we got engaged, I went over to his family's house, and he hadn't been speaking with his dad for a long time. And um, I just remember it being chaotic where his dad came to the door. He just had a lot of anger towards his dad, and I was trying to be understanding because I don't have great relationships with my parents, and so I was like, you're valid in how you feel. And but then they go outside and I just hear yelling and I immediately freeze because just growing up, I there was a lot of yelling in my house, and um it just put me back in that position of like fight or flight, like what's gonna happen? Am I in a dangerous place? And I remember looking out the window and watching him and his brother and his dad all fight with each other. And then I look and I see him punch his dad in the face. And I kind of was just shocked. I was like, no, like he was defending himself, and I kind of just made up a story in my head to just justify that action and just said, no, like he's told me his dad's not a good person. Um, there's probably a reason why he did that. And then I started questioning. I was like, wait, was it him who did it or was his brother? And just defending him because in my head I was engaged to this person and like I couldn't be engaged to someone who was violent. And so I just started just making up these stories to excuse that behavior.
Yeah. I mean, I think watching anyone do that, especially someone that like you've fallen in love with and haven't necessarily known to be a violent person up until that point, that would be so jarring to watch. And then, you describe like in that moment, you're like doing all this bargaining in your head, like, well, I chose this person. What do I do now? Like, what does this mean? And I think that that's a normal thought process. And what you did sounds like something almost anyone would do in that moment. Um, how did things progress after that?
Yeah, so like I said, I kind of just discounted that and moved forward. I don't even think I brought it up to him because just didn't want to know the truth, I think. And so that's he was staying there and he actually ended up getting kicked out of his house first week of April and um our plan was to get married in June and he didn't have anywhere to live and so it was literally like be on the streets or come live with me, but I didn't feel comfortable with that because we weren't married and so I was like, well, we're getting married in June anyway, might as well just get married now. And so the next day we went to the courthouse and got married and started living together. And that's kind of when I really saw his true colors. I mean, it's night and day between just dating and being with someone 24/7. And so um, we started living together. And I remember the first time where I really questioned, like, am I safe? And it was just couple weeks in after getting married, or maybe even a weekend, and we'd gotten in a disagreement, and I was just really confused because in the past disagreements, we'd never yelled at each other. We've always just been able to discuss how we were feeling. Um, Even though he never really um, would acknowledge how I was feeling, but it was always just a discussion. And so when we were living together, there was this night where we had a disagreement, and I couldn't even tell you what it was now, but I just felt really awful about it. And we were going to go to bed, and I just didn't feel comfortable sleeping next to someone that had hurt me so much. And I knew I wanted to resolve it, but I also knew I was really tired and I wanted to be in a good headspace to talk about it. So I let him know that and I told him, "Hey, I'm not in a great headspace. Let's talk in the morning when my head is more clear." And I also just feel like I need some space from you right now, but I don't want to be the woman who kicks you out of the bed and makes you sleep on the couch. So I'm just going to go to the couch and I'm going to go sleep there tonight and we can talk in the morning. And I thought we were fine and I went and slept on the couch and then like throughout the entire night he kept coming out. And the first time he came out, he kind of just stood there and didn't say anything and just like looked at me. I was like, what is he doing? And then he came out again and this time just starts like yelling at me and calling me names. And I was just, again, I froze. I'm like, what is happening? Like, I haven't been called these names in so long. Just because in my childhood that had happened. And so it just was taking me back to that time. And I just froze. And then there was a point he came up behind me on the couch and just like put his face right there and wouldn't move. And I remember thinking like, is he gonna hurt me right now? And just like buried my face into the couch and was just like praying that he would leave. And yeah, I mean, just going back to that time right now is hard because it's just hard knowing that I was married to someone who was like that and thinking that I'd married someone who wasn't like that. And so yeah, that happened pretty quickly as after we got married. And I feel like after that first argument we had, it was just arguments like that day after day. And a couple weeks in, we got into an argument and he just says, I'm leaving you. He started packing his bags and just threatening that he was leaving. And I just sat on the bed and just cried while he was packing because I just also had the realization of I married someone who didn't want to commit to me. And now that I look back, I realize it was part of his game. He really didn't have intention of leaving, but it was just that back and forth of control of he wanted to show me he was in control and I wasn't in control. And but after he did that to me, I feel like the relationship was really dead because he'd crossed my boundary of just saying that he would leave. I knew the person that I wanted to be with forever wouldn't ever say that to me. They would want to stick it out and work it through. And so I think as soon as he said that, I started pulling back more and more and realizing, oh, this isn't a safe person. And so I think because of that, I was able to leave so quickly after all this stuff started happening.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of what I'm hearing is like you did some work to like set healthy boundaries with him. He consistently was just overstepping those boundaries. And I mean, as we talked about before, that like bargaining in your head after you watched that first physical incident with him, you were doing a lot of that, like questioning your own judgment almost of like, was this really who I married? I can't believe I did this. But I'm curious now, like if you know that like your judgment is solid. You like this is not your fault. And if that is the case that you've kind of figured that out, which to me it sounds like you have, like how did you get there and what does that journey look like for you now?
Yeah, I mean, I felt really lucky in the fact that before I married him, I had spent the past few years really just diving into behavioral books and figuring out, yeah, like I said, my own triggers and just really learning how to trust myself more. And obviously, I wasn't at that point when I did marry him, but I had come a long way from where I had been. Um, but I think trusting myself more came from I don't know, even years after, a couple years after everything happened, and really just going to therapy and giving myself grace for everything and realizing I really did the best I could with what I knew at the time. But also just like replaying the traumas that happened and realizing like, okay, that wasn't healthy behavior. Sorry. Um, and I think back to that, kind of just like the peak of everything. So after that first argument, like I said, we just kept fighting and fighting. And I was getting to the point where I was just so depressed because I just felt like anything I said would lead to an argument. And so I just kind of started shutting down, and everyone around me noticed. And people noticed too because marriage is supposed to be the happiest time, is what they say. And they saw that my family saw that I was pulling away. And um, I mean, also things escalate when a child's involved as well. And um, we did our, so we got married civilly and then we did our church wedding in June like we had originally planned. And so that was kind of when everyone thought we were getting married because we didn't even tell a lot of people about the civil marriage, so we still just treated that like our wedding. So a lot of times I'll just refer to that as the wedding. But soon after that, 2 weeks after our big wedding is when I found out that I was pregnant. And he was there with me, so we found out together, and he was really excited. Well, he seemed excited. But then after that is when things really just escalated for me, where I was like, okay, like I'm bringing a baby into this world, and I refuse for my baby to go through what I went through as a child and witness just horrible behavior, witness physical behavior. And um, it was really hard because we both were struggling mentally, and I wanted to make it work. And so I just knew for myself that I needed some space from him in order for it to work. And so we both had agreed on, okay, we're gonna split and hopefully work on ourselves and work on this relationship. And then by the time the baby comes, maybe we can move on, we can move in together. And so I think at this time I was in denial that it was an abusive relationship because I was willing to make that decision of we'll move back in together. And I think as as a woman or as someone in an abusive situation, we kind of just want that safety net, and that's kind of what it was for me of okay, we can make it work. And so that was kind of the mindset I had, and that was the plan. And then I started helping him look for places, and um throughout that time, it was that week, it was just horrible arguments every day. And it got to the point where I took him somewhere and he was yelling at me again in the car. And I just said, I'm not going to let you do this to me anymore. And he got out of the car and the windows were rolled down. And I was like, hey, I'm going to go get a drink while you're looking at this place. And he just like reaches in and grabs the keys from the car and won't let me leave. And I just was shocked. And then he just grabs the keys and he chucks them at me. And I was just terrified that it was going to hit my stomach and just didn't know if he was going to hurt the baby. And I think after that incident happened, I realized like I can't be around him. He's not safe. And but I also knew that he wanted control, so I kind of had to just play his game till he was out of the picture. And so I was nice to him up until he moved out. He was supposed to actually come back and help me move out, and then he didn't come back to help me, which was probably a good thing. But um, there were just so many different factors at play. The control. There was also having the realization that I don't think he ever loved me because he wasn't capable of loving me, but I told myself he could. And I think that's something that happens in a lot of abusive situations where they think they love you, but it really isn't love because they've never learned to love themselves.
Yeah. I mean, everything I'm hearing sounds like very familiar to a T, a lot of things that like many women who go through abusive situations experience. And the one thing that I am hearing that actually sounds like different in your story is that you had done some work prior to this where you would like process some childhood trauma. And, it sounds like because you had done that, you almost had like your wits about you to be like, wait a second, like just because I'm triggered right now, I still deserve validation and, going through that process in your head. And some people don't necessarily have the means to do that processing or anything, and so we see that cycle just continue. And, you know, I am happy to hear that, like, with your son, that, like, that process kind of changed for you. And, you know, I think your story, just hearing that, even like that it is possible, is really powerful because, you know, like I said, people don't have the means to do like the processing through therapy. Like some people just don't have the money or for whatever reason, right? And like, so like just hearing you be able to say like, yeah, I did it and it is possible is like so powerful for someone to hear. Um,
Yeah.
oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry. Are you still there? Can you see
Yeah,
me?
can you hear me?
Yeah, sorry about that. Let me.
No, you're okay.
Okay. Um, yeah, I was just gonna comment on that and say if you're in that position where, yeah, you can't afford therapy or you don't know what to do, I was in that situation as well where I had been trying to find a therapist and like nothing was really helping me. And so before everything happened, I really didn't have a steady therapist where I was processing everything. I mean, if you can, great. I would definitely say first go to, definitely do that. Um, but there are just so many resources now that you can learn from, and that's literally what I did. I was diving into every book I could get my hand on of like how to heal, and like some examples was like Self-Compassion by Kristen Neff, and it's really just learning to love yourself. And another big one was Codependent No More. I really learned how codependent I was in relationships. And I mean, it's definitely easier when you have a therapist to work through you with those things, but if not, definitely look into different books and resources that can help you as well.
Yeah. And I like that you mentioned like that there are like so many resources that are out there. Even like in Utah, there's, I mean, behind me on the map, we have 16 domestic violence shelters, and all of them have like people who can help walk people, you know, that are experiencing this through that process. So those resources are important. Of course, I always love the shout out of, you know, the books that have helped people get through things because it's so important to have like something to hold on to in those moments. What does life look like for you now?
I wish I could say that I have found my happily ever after and I'm thriving, and it's just not that right now. I still feel like I am going through it. I feel like that decision of just being with someone like that, the ripple effect is still rippling. But yeah, it's been 4 years now, and it's just really hard raising a child by myself. He's not in the picture at all. Like I said, he took off, and after that, I treaded the water till he signed the divorce papers. And after the divorce papers were final, we didn't have any contact. And um, it's just, yeah, it's hard. But it's also been peaceful knowing that I don't have someone like that in my life every day with my son. I mean, there's times where I still get nervous and get scared. I ended up reaching out to him over a year ago just because I just was sad for my son and just had this hope, as a lot of abusive survivors do, where it's like maybe they'll change, maybe he'll want to at least be in his son's life. And so I reached out to him, and all I said was, I'm sad that you're not in your son's life. Is there any way you'd want to talk? And I got an email back from him telling me to never reach out to him again. He wants nothing to do with his son, and threatened me that I would pay for everything I've done. And so I ended up turning that into the police. And then I heard after that he actually left the country a few weeks later. And so part of me feels good because he's not in the country anymore, but there's always this thought that's gonna be, is he going to make me pay for what I've done, you know? And that's definitely been on his mind, and you just never know. And so part of me just wants to be quiet and not say anything because I don't want to provoke any responses, but at the same time I just don't want him to have my power. And I feel like just sharing my story is important. And I feel like that's part of healing for every survivor.
Yeah. And as I mentioned before, I'll mention again, we're so grateful to hear your story and, to have you share in this space. And like, thank you so much for being vulnerable. Um, the last thing I want to ask you is there any piece of advice or thoughts that you have that you'd like to share for other survivors to hear?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's taken me a long time to even say that I was in an abusive situation. And I think that can be one of the hardest things is just accepting that. Um, and I would just say if you have been in a situation like this, you know that abuse doesn't always mean you're getting punched, you know? And to really just recognize if someone's trying to control you, because that's really what abuse comes down to. And it was those little things that made me realize, oh, he's not hitting me, but he is trying to block the door anytime we have an argument so I can't leave. He's throwing keys at me to intimidate me, and they could have hurt me. Um, he's intimidating me when we're on the freeway and he's putting his hand on the emergency brake, even though I don't think he's going to pull it, but he's trying to scare me. So just noticing the little things and just understanding your worth way more than someone trying to control your life. You are an independent person. Your job isn't to just be married to someone. Your job is to have a fulfilling life for yourself.
That was beautiful. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you again for having me.
Just so much appreciation for you. So thank you so much.
Thank you.